Hey, what's going on, ladies and gentlemen? My name is Quarbit, and it has been a while since my first tier list for the mechanics of each religion in EU4. There have been several changes since 1.28, which was the last time I made one, and so it's very obviously at this point quite obsolete. 1.31 has also seen a couple of updates to the mechanics for Totemism, Sikhism, and Zoroastrian, as well as the introduction of the Alcharinga faith in Australia. Another reason why I want to redo the tier list is because there are certain monuments which require certain religions to make use of them, and I want to incorporate those ideas into how powerful each religion can be. So I'll be rating them all not just by their mechanics, but by their starting situations and the monuments they can make use of. Once again, I made a tier list template which now includes Alcharinga if you want to make your own. And of course, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe for more EU4. So let's start off with the newest addition to the game, Alcharinga. Alcharinga starts off rather weak, but has the potential to give you a ridiculous number of bonuses. It works pretty similar to Fetishist, Hindu, and Norse, where you have to pick whatever bonus that your ruler is going to use for life. Of course, a republic is the best way to make use of these religions, because then you can just change it every couple of years, but what stands out about Alcharinga is its ability to evolve over time as you become stronger and stronger and as you complete more missions. Speaking of which, if you don't start with the Oceania missions, then I don't think it's actually possible to unlock more cults, so keep in mind you're also kind of locked to playing the Australian tags if you want to reach some of the really powerful dreams. Overall, I'd say the different cults that you can unlock are extremely powerful, and once you of course unlock all of them, you get that extra one at the end called the Rainbow Serpent, which in my opinion is exceedingly overpowered. It literally just gives you an extra monthly power in each category, which is exceedingly broken, and even if it does take a long time to get there, of course the other bonuses are nothing to scoff at either, like 5% discipline, 10% morale of armies, core cost reduction, aggressive expansion, additional colonists, a missionary strength, Diplo relations. I mean, they're all generally just good bonuses to have. So for that reason, I'll be putting Alcharinga in the A tier. Next up, we have Anglican, which has always been rather powerful just because you have the development cost and the additional innovativeness gain. Now that innovativeness gain has been doubled, this is even more ridiculous than before. And on top of that, the church power interactions have always been quite strong, giving you free mercantilism, free stability, or free money. And of course, being Anglican, you are still able to get personal unions, which is one of the most powerful mechanics in the game. So for all of these reasons, I'm going to be putting Anglican in the A tier. Now, Animism's always been sort of one of those weird ones that just doesn't even have a mechanic at all. I think the only purpose of Animism is sort of serving as this bridge between being able to go from something that isn't a pagan faith to a pagan faith. You can swap to Animism and then use that to adopt a different faith, so you know, there's that aspect. But mechanically, if you were to try to stay as Animist, it just kind of sucks in general, so Animist is just going to go to the F tier. Next up is Catholic, which before Emperor wasn't really one of the best religions out there, but if you do have Emperor, then of course you have access to a bunch of new mechanics, like the Golden Bulls and a couple other things. And while I still don't consider it to be like one of the most powerful religions in the game, it certainly is a little better than it was before, especially with things like institutions are made a lot easier early game, and you can get a couple of really good bonuses if the Council of Trent goes in your favor. But I still kind of consider it a little worse than the other Christian faiths just because it doesn't have as many active modifiers that you can pick from. So for that reason, Catholic is going to be going into the B tier. Confucian's always sort of been this odd one out when it comes to the rest of the religions, because you don't really have to convert anything. Your main purpose is to harmonize with the rest of the religions, which gives you a couple of bonuses if you manage to wait that 34 years. And on top of that, all of that religious group gets treated as if it's your true faith, which makes it a lot easier. And the bonuses it does give you are okay. They're not the best in the world, but the fact that you can get them basically for free by just waiting a little bit of time does make it quite good. The only problem with Confucian really is that you have to harmonize with the other religions, because converting provinces is actually pretty bad for your harmony. But overall the mechanics aren't that bad, so I'm just going to drop it in the C tier. Next up is Coptic, which has a pretty nice mechanic which allows you to grab up to 5 bonuses depending on which ones you pick when you get each holy site. All of these bonuses are fairly decent, and of course Coptic also has the ability to get personal unions because it is a Christian faith. but I also wouldn't exactly consider it as good as the other ones because it has a pretty bad starting situation, and your bonuses are also locked behind having to fight some pretty powerful enemies, so for that reason I'm going to be putting Coptic in the C tier. Next up we have Fetishist, which doesn't exactly suffer from the same problems as Animist, but I also wouldn't exactly consider it that powerful either. Now, Fetishist can get you a bunch of really good bonuses if you go ahead and, unlock all of the cults and stuff, but one of the main problems that Fetishist suffers from is of course the fact that it's really hard to convert anything. There aren't really that many bonuses, and the religions around you, which are mainly Catholic and Sunni, have missionary strength malices for you to try to convert, but if you do manage to spread out pretty far, you can get some decent bonuses. So while they're not exactly C tier fantastic bonuses, I would put Fetishist in the D tier. Next up is Hindu, which was always fairly solid, especially if you were a republic, because you could just swap deities every now and then. And the bonuses you do get are also fairly powerful, with stuff like 5% discipline, 10% core cost reduction, 2% missionary strength, and the like. And on top of that, where Hindu mainly starts, which is India, most of the area is pretty homogeneously Hindu, which makes it easy for you to conquer and not have to convert that much. Hindu also has access to the Prambanan temple, which is really solid. It gives you plus 2% missionary strength, an extra missionary, and 10% dev cost modifier at its max, as well as the ability to use the Angkor Wat, which can give you minus 10% tech cost at max. So for those reasons, I'm going to be putting Hindu in the A tier. Next up we have Hussite, which is one of the more powerful Christian denominations, because for starters it gives you plus 2% missionary strength versus heretics, which is huge, and minus 5% shock damage received. It can also have access to a Reformation Center, which is nice, and a good portion of the church aspects are very powerful, such as minus 10% war score cost versus other religions, which is basically a must-have at all times, as well as 20% national manpower modifier, tolerance of the true faith, goods produced modifier, and 30% improved relations whenever you decide to not go to war. Overall, even though Hussite starts off in a disadvantaged situation where it is a very small religion to begin with, it can very quickly expand because everything around it is a heretic religion, which it has a bonus against. So for that reason, I'm going to put Hussite in the A tier. Next up we have Ibadi. Now, there aren't really too many differences between all of the Muslim faiths. They really just have like one stat change between them. But Ibadi's is 10% goods produced modifier, which is really quite solid. But its starting situation sort of leaves something to be desired. So even if it does have the piety mechanic, which is a fantastic mechanic, it's also a little difficult to expand. You're going to have to try and convert everything around you as well. And so for the reason that it's just not a very big religion, I'm going to have to put Ibadi in the C tier. Next up is the South American faith of Inti. Now, if you've played any of the Inti nations before and played a full game, you'll know that the mechanics for Inti are not very hard to reform with, and they happen to give you really good bonuses. Like 10% manpower recovery speed, 10% morale of armies, a colonist for free, and 10% core creation cost. It is a little harder to convert the provinces around you, but the majority of the time you're just going to be colonizing, which automatically converts provinces. The only problem is once you encounter some of the European nations, of course converting them is going to be a little more difficult, but by that point it's pretty likely that you'll have your idea groups, and you'll be able to take religious, which will allow that to be a little easier. So because of those bonuses, I'm going to be putting Inti in the B tier. Next up we have Judaism, which unfortunately has still received 0 mechanics over the years. The only thing it has to its name is Tolerance of the True Faith and Possible Advisors, and while Tolerance of the True Faith is a nice modifier, you also only have like 5 or 6 provinces in total, maybe. So what you really need at that point is the ability to convert the other provinces around you, which it doesn't have. So unfortunately, Judaism's gonna have to go in the F tier. Next up we have Mahayana. Now, I've never really liked playing with the Buddhist faiths because I kind of find that their mechanics require you to play less aggressive than I like to play, or else you won't be able to reach the maximum potential of your mechanics. But in Leviathan, it's pretty easy to say that these religions have received a massive buff just through the great projects that they can use. For instance, if you have all of the monuments that are specific to Buddhism completely maxed out, then you can get something like 5% missionary strength, 10% tech cost, and like 2 extra missionaries, which is extremely powerful. So while normally I would sort of place these in the D or C tier, I'm probably going to have to put them in the B tier now. Next up we have Mayan, otherwise known as everyone's favorite religion to use for the Ryukyu world conquest, and it's really no surprise why. It can give you -2 national unrest, 10% infantry combat ability, and -20% core creation cost. The only real problem with it is the fact that you have to go through the whole reform system, which is kind of annoying because you have to continuously conquer and then lose a bunch of provinces over and over. But once you do eventually get through that, you're left with these modifiers which are fantastic, and you get to keep them for the rest of the game. I was debating maybe the S tier, but I think I'm still gonna leave S tier for the one religion I consider to be still the best in the game. Next up we have Nahuatl, which is like a decent religion. It requires you to be as aggressive as possible in the early game, and you have to go through this whole system of vassalizing people and then keeping track of truces to make sure that you're being as efficient as possible. The doom system is also a little bit annoying, but isn't really the worst thing to deal with. And the bonuses you're left with are just sort of decent. You get 5% discipline, which is great, an extra colonist, which is also great, but the other ones I'd consider to be just okay. So in my opinion, Nahuatl goes into the C tier. Next up we have another pagan religion, which is Norse. Norse is of course not an actual starting religion in the game, you're gonna have to spawn it in yourself using a custom nation. Of course you can technically put it just about anywhere in the world, so its starting situation doesn't matter that much. The only problem is of course you're gonna have to go and convert a bunch of provinces, in fact all of them, because there will be no other Norse provinces. There are a couple of good bonuses for Norse though. Of course you can get the -10% CCR, you can get the 5% discipline, the trade efficiency, the goods produced modifier, and the tech cost, which are all, quite nice to have. But they also have no specific decisions or events. That means that there are no modifiers for your missionary strength, and the best you're really gonna get is maybe that Stonehenge modifier, along with whatever you can get from religious ideas. So while I do consider its bonuses to be roughly sort of on par with Hindu, its starting situation is a lot worse, so I'm gonna have to put it in the C tier. Next up we have Orthodox, which I consider to be the best religion in the game, and it's pretty much no secret as to why. At maximum Patriarch authority, you get an automatic 2% missionary strength, and in all of your Orthodox provinces you'll get -3 local unrest and 33% local manpower. Not to mention the ability to use the icon of St. Michael, which gives you an additional 10% manpower recovery speed and +5% discipline, or the icon of Iluza, which gives you another -3 national unrest. So this makes Orthodox one of the most stable religions, while also giving you an absolutely disgusting amount of manpower. Not to mention the Orthodox events, which by themselves are rather powerful. You can sacrifice a little bit of Patriarch authority to get stuff like stability, money, admin power, lose a bit of inflation and stuff like that. But really just the versatility of the icons as well as the amount of power you can get at your peak is just disgusting, so I'm going to be putting Orthodox in the S tier. Next up we have Protestant, which I've always considered to be slightly better than Catholic, at least up until Emperor released, because the ability to have a center of reformation allows you to convert your own country faster, as well as prepare the land around you for conquest. And your faith aspects can be quite powerful, such as 10% manpower recovery speed, idea cost, production efficiency, national rest, discipline, stuff like that. And of course you're still able to get yourself some personal unions, so I consider Protestant to be in the B tier. Next up we have Reformed, which is usually kind of considered this worse version of Protestantism, because the range of bonuses you can have aren't quite as versatile, and even though some of them are more powerful, you just don't have as much of a choice. And Protestantism almost always spawns and spreads first, which means it converts more provinces, and so Reformed has less of an opportunity to flip as many. The modifiers you can also have are temporary, you don't really get to keep them. You have to sort of manage them, of course, which can be a little bit annoying. So yeah, Reformed is just sort of going to go in the C tier. Next up we have Shia, which is again not that much different from the other Muslim faiths. Your only real difference is that you have 5% morale of armies instead of whatever the other bonus is for the other two. But you do start off with a decent number of provinces in Persia that are Shia, so you're not quite as disadvantaged as Ibadi is. And of course the piety mechanics are, still some of the best in the game, so for that reason I'm going to be putting it in the B tier. Now, I've always found Shinto to be a little hard to pin down. Of course, there are the levels of isolationism, which allow you to get certain bonuses depending on how isolationist you are. Now, these can of course be really good bonuses, such as tech cost, development cost, and idea cost, as well as an extra missionary, but it does require a little bit of planning and know-how to know exactly which stages you're going to go through to get the most out of Shinto. And you also start off with 10% morale of armies, which is really quite good. In the hands of the right player, I'm sure Shinto can be really solid, but generally speaking, I wouldn't really rate it anything higher than a B tier. Next up, we have Sikhism, which is another one of the ones that was changed for 1.31. Now, I have to admit, I haven't really had the time to check out too much of the Sikh mechanics, but from what I can tell and what I'm looking at here, they do seem to be quite powerful. You can stack up to 6 really solid bonuses from stuff like production efficiency, tech cost, diplo rep, morale of armies, discipline, and even stuff like monarch skills. It also looks to me like each time you get a guru, you also get an extra, monthly type of mana point for that duration, which is quite the nice bonus. And even if you have to wait a little bit for it to spawn, and then even after that, it does become a little difficult to convert things because you are, of course, a very new religion. I think that these bonuses are quite nice, so I think it's going to be at least a C tier, if maybe not a B tier. In fact, no, actually I'm willing to put it in the B tier. Next up we have Sunni, which is really solid. Of course, it holds the majority of the Muslim provinces at the beginning of the game, which makes it so that you don't really have to convert as much when you're expanding into other Muslim countries. The piety mechanic is of course as solid as always, and so I'm gonna have to put it at least in the B tier. Now next up we have Tangri, which might actually just be the only one I put in the E tier. The reason is because Tangri doesn't really have much of its own mechanic. It sort of just allows you to pretend that another religion is the same as yours, and you get like a small bonus depending on what it is. And so whenever you do go Tangri, you're almost always exclusively made to go humanist, because let's be honest, you're not going to be converting that much if you're a horde. And so while it is useful for your religious unity by itself, it doesn't really give that many bonuses. So for that reason, it's not as bad as Animist or for Judaism, but it isn't exactly as good as anything else on this list. Now I've talked about Mahayana and how the Buddhist faiths were updated for 1.31, and Theravada isn't really that much different. It's practically the exact same thing. There's just like one tiny little difference in its bonus. And so for that reason, it gets to also go into the B tier. And then we have Totemism, which was one of the other religions picked up and reworked for 1.31. I have to say, the new mechanic doesn't really add too much, but it is sort of nice to have. You can add these little bonuses over time from your previous leaders, and you can have up to 10 of them, which means if you stack them quite well, then that is, really nice to have. I have to admit, I don't have a ton of experience using Totemism, but from what I gathered, there is just sort of a chance that you end up with rulers that have good abilities. So there's the possibility that you can fill out all of your slots with really good stuff, but it's also kind of RNG based, so you can also fill it out with absolute garbage, or in the worst case, basically nothing at all. There's at least a decent chance that you're going to get some good bonuses, so it doesn't go directly to the E or F tier, but instead I think it'll go to the D tier. And then we have Vajrayana, which of course is another Buddhist faith. I've already talked about these ones, so this one's just going to go into the B tier. And last but certainly not least, we have Zoroastrian, which was the last mechanic to be updated in 1.31. And while it didn't really receive its own unique set of mechanics, it did borrow the Coptic one, which is pretty okay. And of course, through these bonuses you can get stuff like 2% missionary strength, a 10% governing capacity modifier, and local goods produced, which are fairly decent modifiers. And keep in mind, they also now have their own unique monument, which has some really powerful combat modifiers, so in my opinion, Zoroastrian gets to go into the C tier. And so there you have it, a complete tier list for all of the religions included in 1.31 Leviathan. Let me know which ones you agree with and which ones you disagree with. I'll be interested to hear your very civil and sound arguments in the comments down below. Of course, don't forget to leave a like if you enjoyed the video, leave a dislike if you disliked it. This is Quarbit signing off, and as always, have a fantastic day. And just at the end of the video, I would like to give a massive thank you to all of the wonderful people over at Patreon for the month of May. Starting in the general tier, we have Quiet Guy, Brennan Arsenault, Ben Greenhagen, Torvald, Dire Avenger, and Farron. In the Prince tier, we have Snowraven, Rockbox 2020, Robert Kaleno, and Bouncer Steve. In the King tier, we have Chewy Shoot and Natsuki. In the Elector tier, we have TFLJ Martis. And in the Conqueror of Worlds tier, we have The Watcher. Thank you guys so much for your pledges this month, it means a lot to me, and I truly just cannot thank you enough.